So this is something I've been looking forward to sharing for a long, long time. Jey Uso will become the tribal chief. I know at first glance that gives a lot of people a moment of pause. What do you mean? He's barely even able to compete with Gunther. He's barely able even to hold the audience's attention. Yeet's just a gimmick. Yeet's carrying him. Jey Uso is just a gimmick. So hear me out. Jey Uso, obviously, long-standing member of the Bloodline, did some questionable things in his time, but ultimately, we saw a couple of years ago, he gets removed from the Bloodline. He goes on to have a rivalry with his own brother Jimmy. Goes to WrestleMania. They face off one-on-one. He manages to get the better of him. In that moment, the reaction was positive, but ultimately there was a lot of feedback that the match itself was underwhelming. Jey goes on to participate in the main event. He runs out when Jimmy was out to interfere in the Cody Rhodes Roman Reigns match, and he stops his brother, tackles him off the stage. After the aftermath of WrestleMania is concluded, Jey's all alone. He's got to start competing on his own. He's got to start figuring out his own path. So he starts competing solo, and you can tell there's a reluctance. He doesn't really believe in himself. Along the way, Jey is given the opportunity to win his first ever solo championship. He beats Braun Breaker fair and square for the Intercontinental title. Now, there's some speculation that Braun maybe in real life stepped out of line and was being given a pseudo punishment of sorts, and they showing that they could take the belt away from him. But nonetheless, Jey won it. And it gave him a really powerful moment of it was his first ever solo achievement of that significance in WWE, despite having been there for as many years as he's been there. And he gets to have that moment with the fans. So he was already blowing the roof off of every building he entered, doing his Yeet entrance. But to acknowledge that the WWE saw him as a champion for the first time and let him hold that belt, let him walk to the ring, and for him to share that moment with the fans and share his emotion, crying in the ring, acknowledging he maybe didn't know if he'd ever get there. Maybe he doesn't even feel like he belongs there, but he did it. Now, during this period, Roman Reigns has started to make his return. Jimmy Uso is running around trying to stir the pot with the new bloodline, trying to find some allies for the old bloodline. Starts talking to Sami Zayn, starts trying to pull them in. Sami and Jey are obviously sharing a few words here and there. But when it came down to it and they had to go to War Games, it was obvious they needed him. Jey demonstrated he still hadn't truly forgiven everyone. Hadn't even forgiven his brother, who he was beginning to start talking to. But slowly over time, you saw him begin to acknowledge his family. He would acknowledge Jimmy. He would acknowledge Sami. And you could see that there was a positivity in wanting to be back in that group, back in that element. But he also knew he had to leave that behind. He had to walk his own path. So we get to War Games. And to this point, we still hadn't truly seen Roman and Jey mesh. We still hadn't seen them truly come to terms with everything that had happened and reset the books. What we saw is a willingness to ignore certain realities for the sake of a different reality. The reality that the new bloodline, Solo Sikoa, Fatu, Tommy Tonga, those guys were a legitimate threat, and they spat on everything that the old bloodline had to offer. So Jey reluctantly agrees to participate in the War Games. Obviously, they go on to recruit CM Punk as well. But there was something really telling about how the War Games started. Typically, you're going to save your big dog for the last entrance, or you're going to have other people come out to your entrance. In this case, the big dog should have been Roman Reigns. He's held the title for a number of years. He's coming back. He's spitting in the face of the new bloodline. He's trying to take over control. He's their tribal chief. But nope. He doesn't get to come out last. You know who comes out last? Jey Uso. They saved Jey Uso for last, after Roman had already been locked inside the cage. And then Jey didn't even come down out of the entrance with everybody else. He came through the crowd. And the pop was so much more than anything Roman had managed to achieve to that point. It was bigger than what CM Punk had managed to achieve. And it was this acknowledgement that these guys are a little bit closer to on the same level than they had been. More than just coming out last. When you look at all the players that were in that match, you had Sammy, you had Jimmy, Roman Reigns, CM Punk, and Jey. Out of that entire lineup, who did they turn to start the match off? The person that's going to have to go in there, set the tone, is going to have to survive an unfair beatdown because they were at the disadvantage, and is going to have to remain valuable through the length of the entire match. You have a choice to make. You can either throw in somebody who's expendable, someone not as likely to be a bigger player. Prime candidate, probably Jimmy in that particular case. Or you try to send in someone that you think can get things done, that can set the tone, that can persevere through the adversity of being outnumbered. They picked Jey Uso. The match goes on. You can tell there's a chemistry, there's a respect being forged, there's a brother in arms mentality going on. And I have to say, if it wasn't for that final conclusion where Roman shakes the hand of CM Punk, what do you think would have happened with Jey and Roman? Obviously, we're not going to know. But fast forward past War Games, Jey starts to go back on his own separate path. Roman Reigns goes on to premiere on Netflix, faces Solo Sikoa for the Ula Fala, wins it, is ordained by The Rock as the tribal chief. And never once does he turn back and begin to look to reforge what he had. Not only does he not approach Jey Uso and try to bring him back into the family, he doesn't bother bringing back Jimmy. He doesn't bother bringing back Sammy. He could care less. He left them for multiple months after WrestleMania, watched Paul Heyman get put through the table, watched all kinds of torture happen on TV. And after they finally climbed the mountain, they finally got to the peak, they finally reclaimed what was theirs. Nothing. He all but disappears again. We end up moving forward. Now we're at this story that involves him and Paul potentially falling out. But the thing that stands out to me is Jey was the one that was hyping the family. It was Sammy and Jimmy looking to Jey in that moment of leadership. They looked to him for the answers. They didn't look to Roman. Roman was the figurehead that they were trying to set everything back to right on. But the truth is, he never cared about them. and you could tell they knew that, and to an extent, they didn't care about him either. So, where I see this going, and I'm putting this out here before WrestleMania 41 takes place, I see an evolution of Jey Uso taking place before our eyes. I saw this happening around the time of War Games, but Jey is the reason why the family got back together. Jimmy may have been the one recruiting everyone, but Jey is the reason why it worked, why everybody believed in it. I believe they're positioning us as Roman is getting older in his years, is spending less time with the WWE. He's just not as valuable as a product for the long haul as a younger Jey Uso is. I see there being a path where the new bloodline is going to evolve again. In time, Solo Sikoa is going to have to come back to one of the original bloodline. He's going to have to seek refuge in the same people that he's turned out. Fatu is going to take over the new bloodline. He's going to make it meaner than ever. He's going to make it impossible for them to gain ground. Impossible for Solo to gain ground. Solo's going to have to ask for help. The question I have is, where does Solo go? Roman Reigns already doesn't care about the people that even stood up with him. Why would he go there? He may start there, but what value does that have? Solo has two brothers, Jimmy and Jey Uso. I believe that is where this begins. The moment that Solo Sikoa seeks to find shelter in the storm, he's going to turn to his brothers and he's going to beg for forgiveness. And when that happens, I believe Roman Reigns is going to take an objection to this. I believe Roman Reigns is going to challenge the tribal family versus the blood of the Usos. I believe Jey Uso is going to not start as, but by the end will emerge as the unquestioned leader of the bloodline. And his path for that right now is fairly straightforward. He's obviously won an opportunity at the Royal Rumble to be at WrestleMania 41. He's going to go on to face Gunther. I believe he's going to defeat Gunther and bring his legitimacy into the light. He's going to spend the next couple of months, maybe through the summer, working the belt. And I don't know that he has to keep that belt forever. He can hold it for a couple of months, go on a strong run, and then we can move on. It would have legitimized him along the way. It would have given him the background that he belongs at the top. But now he can start going back to defending his family. I believe there is an arc that will lead us ultimately to Jey Uso having to go through both Jacob Fatu and Roman Reigns to reclaim the Ulafala. Now, if you've watched some of my other fantasy booking videos, one of my biggest claims right now is I believe at WrestleMania 41, The Rock, Paul Heyman, and Seth Rollins are going to steal the Ulafala from Roman, and they're going to give it to The Rock. I don't know how the Ulafala makes its way around, but I don't see Jimmy facing The Rock. I see Roman Reigns eventually taking on The Rock, regaining the Ulafala, and then I see Jey Uso stepping up and taking it. I see Roman Reigns looking to his typical squad of followers and basically motioning them, beckoning them, follow me. And I see them all taking a step back behind Jey and saying, no, he didn't pull us out of this storm. Jey did. That's my path forward for Jey Uso. That is my fantasy booking. I feel like they've given us a lot to believe and to tug at these strings and to see him go through this character arc. At the end of the day, wrestling is all about development. It's all about transitioning. It's all about finding that new path. And right now, Jey's on one of the strongest paths of the last 2 years of reshaping and reapproaching who his character is. Roman's going to age out of this. It's going to have to, if you want to carry on that story that's been so successful, that has made so much money, you're going to need somebody to replace that. And I believe that somebody is Jey Uso. And I believe they've already started putting those dominoes in place. So roughly around 2027, I think we might see Jey Uso, the Yeet tribal chief. Let me know what you think. If you think I'm way off, if you have extra to add to this to support it, if you have your own theory, leave it in the comments. If you made it this far, I appreciate it. If you can like and subscribe, it'd mean the world to me. Have a good one. Enjoy the show.